realizing in this moment I did not check to see how tall the poets are, so we'll have to adjust. Hi, I'm Kenneth. My pronouns are he and him, and I am the curator and host of this here reading series, Poetry at the Point, our first reading of 2024. I'm really glad you're here. As I say often, I don't take for granted when people actually come out of their houses to a live poetry reading in 2024, especially in the winter, although it's not quite as bizarrely terrible as it was yesterday. So thanks for braving the rain. Really glad you're here. I'm also really excited to bring you some poetry tonight from both Kristin and Kirby. I think it's going to be really fantastic, and yeah, a big treat for me. So always got to start with some shout outs, as always, to our members of the Poetry Center. You can become a member at the website. I'm sure Aaron is putting that fancy banner at the bottom of the screen right now. So I'm going to take this opportunity to say hello to all you people on Al Gore's interwebs, whether through Facebook or YouTube or our website. If you're tuning in on today the 23rd, what's the date today? Yeah. Or in the future, we're glad you're here too. Shout out to the Missouri Arts Council and the Regional Arts Commission, whose support makes this program and others possible every year. We don't take that for granted for sure. And thanks always to the Focal Point, who is in the process of always improving their spaces. I'll get to that in a moment. Logistically, want to shout out a couple of events we have coming up. One coming up the soonest in time on February 5th. And if you need more, you can see that guy in the red shirt in terms of information. Poetry in the Woods, one of our friendly neighbor organizations here in town, is having their Spring Forward reading series with Tess Taylor and Dana Levin, our very own Poetry Center's Dana Levin. That is Monday, February 5th at 7 p.m. That'll be at the Novel Neighbor in Webster Groves. All these will be available on our website, or at least the Poetry Center ones for sure. Again, see Travis about Poetry in the Woods. Observable readings, our first reading is coming up in February. It will be Jackie Germain and Teresa Ziglowitz. I pronounced that correctly. I really tried hard with the pronunciations, I swear to God. That's Monday, February 26th at 7 p.m. at the High-Low, our space in Midtown. Books will be for sale from the lovely, as always, Left Bank Books. And then just confirmed today, so look forward for more information at the end of this week or next week. We are having a member appreciation event that we had to push. The original intention was doing it a month or two ago. Life happened, but it will be, we're styling it our leap year event, so it'll be on February 29th. And that will be at Rockwell Beer in the Grove. And that'll be Thursday, February 29th from 5 to 7 to celebrate specifically our members and volunteers. So again, specific plug, become a member. You can do it. It's easy. You said it and forget it. I do it too. Y'all are really quiet. Am I that boring, or are you that asleep? Both? Cool. Couple more things. Housekeeping, if you're here in the actual space, bathrooms are out that way to the left and then to the right. If the light goes out, because there are people working in this building, the light switch is just out that door to the right. That makes sense to you? Yep. Okay. And again, thank you for you tuning in online. Keep those comments and questions coming. We're going to have some Q&A with our poets after they read. So as you think of things you want to talk with them about, make a mental note, jot it down, because we want to have a conversation with you about it. Okay? So, without further ado, Kirby Ewald works in St. Louis as a communications specialist for museums and cultural institutions. She enjoys writing in a variety of forms, poems, essays, short stories, and novels, and is drawn to messages that wrestle with nature, culture, and observation. Her work touches upon her experiences as a museum and zoo professional, a wife and a mother, and sometimes someone passionate about moving to new places without vetting them first. She is an emerging writer and holds a BA in International Studies with minors in creative writing and political science from George Washington University. Kirby, please.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to move this so I don't fix it in water. All right. I feel like I already passed the first test. So, hi everyone. Before doing an introduction, I'm actually going to jump in and read one of my poems. And then after my first poem, I'll give more of an introduction of the work that I'm going to share tonight. So. All right. This poem is called, I Know You Can't Spell Baloney. I know you can do the easy thing. Start with something sharp. Ballistic missile this, inflation that, species dead and gone. Put it on the cover and demand attention, like a vain, glittering rainbow ball hanging from a chewable line at the library Thursday morning. But can you do the hard thing? Let the silent observation be in the foreword, like we write to be heard. Or the library was celebrating the 80s, and I had another migraine about history-making forecasts. To take hold of the reader, or to nod imperceptibly while they browse, because they read to enjoy something, learn something, and sometimes to check if aches have leaked into every crevice yet, if there is no escaping drywall and corners. And will you bring that out for an arc? Stab them with sharp memories, the dance they missed, a bad interview, minuscule disposable bestiaries that do more harm? Would you place it on top to get cheap attention? A writer could pass with a gesture, all fingers, or a wave could turn inside itself, push against walls, grab them. Now their bag is on the floor, they lean in, unblinking, to awaken their feeling. No choices, no choices. They must look, and you could give them what they need, or whisper in the end, nothing helpful, like I know you can't spell baloney. Thank you. Thank you. I'm super happy to be here and happy to see so many familiar faces. I want to say a quick thanks to Kenneth and Aaron and everyone who does Poetry at the Point. Thank you, Poetry in the Woods. Big shout out to everyone here and your support. It's been super awesome writing with you all the past few months. So excited to know you guys and just to be a part of this group. And thank you to people tuning in, but also people sitting in chairs right now. I feel like you are the winners tonight. You got out. So thank you for betting, giving us your time and taking a chance on the evening. I'm going to be sharing 8 more poems tonight. And my poetry tends to come from looking up the layered complexities of people. I feel like people bring everything, the entire selves, every painful thing and joyful thing and everything they've ever done, they bring to every moment of their life and all their dreams and all their worries. It's like when they're folding clothes, when they're talking to people, that's all there. And I find that complexity really interesting. So a lot of my poetry comes from just looking into those moments and finding all those layers that are kind of unsaid. But the work I'll be sharing tonight has kind of 2 reoccurring themes. One is nature. Like Kenneth said, I've worked in zoos and I'm obsessed with them. I love what zoos do for Earth's wild places. So what that kind of means is you're going to have a lot of clouds and trees and birds in my poetry and pandas, but I've saved pandas for another night, so not pandas tonight. But a lot of animals. And another theme of my poems tonight is society. When I was younger, I lived in China for a short time, and that was a very impactful experience for me. So whether I know it or not, or like it or not, just looking at Chinese society and American society tends to just sneak into a lot of my writing. So if you hear a lot of that in this, it's not all random. There's background to why that is kind of popping up. But with that being said, I hope you enjoy this. I write for myself. I love writing, but I'm also here reading because I hope that people enjoy hearing it and enjoy some of these poems. And above everything, I just hope you enjoy the evening. So thank you very much. I'll go ahead and start with my next poem, which is Cherry Wood. I see what you mean when you say, the nail dug into our cherry wood floors at noon, yesterday, when the movers plowed on, churning raw evidence of where it tore. I see what you mean quite clearly. There is no space for misinterpretation. The scratch is there, though pictured a bit more dramatically upon earlier telling. A skinny line, but Noah's flood in my mind, collecting a dust of grinds as I, microwave coffee, stare near windows, my view mahogany outlined. The trim is meticulous, I notice all too late. That will not do, so I approach my sister. I mind her floors while she wrangles a child, and I naturally discover nothing at all that takes a scratch from fields or cherry wood. This next poem is for anyone who loves poetry that rhymes in a predictable way and follows the rules. This poem is for you. It's a sonnet, and it's my only poem tonight that rhymes consistently the way it's supposed to. So I hope you enjoy it. This is called They Grow. I birthed a boy in 2 bags under my eyes in grass, and determined to leave nothing unsaid, I told them I would cut the roots of my ties and grind down my hobbies to help them instead. There were races and wrestles and quick babbles, also meetings and flat tires, tense afternoons. I put my son in a room with his rattles, dabbed lotion under my eyes in cold lunch rooms. And when I stopped to read a Seuss, he, displeased, pointed me to the side for some elbow room. As he fixed a train, I tickled his feet, squeezed, but found he was old, a thin towering bloom, of the kind you might find and cut a leaf off to mix under 2 eyes or drink for a cough. Thank you. The economy of a cloud. Direct clouds, decisive clouds, demanding clouds. I once caught a cloud, pink, sweet, nothing more, and stuck to my grandfather at a water park on a bland blue day. But now there is a white roof above, sitting atop like a juror misplaced. I have become familiar with clouds that come from cigarettes bought at Walmart down the street, and questioning clouds, the big and bold background, clouds in my coffee, poured over half and half with no one else around. Every night, I think my bed is a cloud. I lay and it lifts, and when I rise, a little mist slips into my ear, floats through until my head is above it all, but the body is still tied to this sphere. Now, there are absolutely bashful clouds, always concerned with what's going on down here. But back then, when my cotton cloud was almost gone, my grandfather sat across from me at a speckled table, his shirt accumulating spray drops from the pool. Water slides slid through the days in the sun, and shimmers popped in my eye, blocking rays, like gathering weather might hide in a shadow, part of a stage. He bought me a treat, told me our time together was a gift. I nodded. He gathered his thoughts about the economy of the sweet moment. I listened, and now as I tell you this, I miss him, and him using my cotton candy stick to orchestrate how to lasso freedom, paint it sweet pink, and sell it to a passerby. He asked me what I thought of something. In a floral swimming suit with yellow floaties on each arm, I yearned, deeply sighed, and trying very hard, wondered aloud if it would rain while looking at something of a dry bud above us. This is so easy. She knows what a nightingale looks like, sounds like, and a deciduous hazel tree watches them behind deep green binoculars and cargo shorts with no one else, part of the evening, like a lion in the bush, one of the birds. She is a night owl smoking behind the bar, adding liquor without labels, hands flying in muscle memory of boundless sunsets, observing tequila sunrises, little brown drinks and breezes caught by woven blankets. She's 118 pounds. Pecks at organic berries and plain Greek yogurt, only out of necessity after 3 in the afternoon. Doesn't even want more. Eats lavishly of classical novels, intricate acoustics, and 27 inches. Perfect alignment, a sharp jugular notch rising with waves and equal to the sun. Over a surfboard, always upwards, studied by teak wood, the crest, the spray, ascending to cloud the sky, birds of paradise, peace. She walks holding bananas, coffee, persimmon, and strapless dresses. She fills rooms as winter or summer, boiling teacups, hot air, socks, candles, corners, or kites and kaleidoscopes. She acts on a whim, knows who she is and has been, and they always will be, is funny but soft, gentle, golden, empathetic with ease, nice in a way that sidesteps social cues and insecurities, there in a way that breeds trust and truth, a candy-filled piece of advice on the middle shelf of youth. She is kind. She wins at darts, has a fat black pig named Mystery, owns unreal estate on the bay, has a husband, 5 kids, best friends, is needed once for nothing, prepares fish with a thermometer, uses on-brand candles, organic cucumbers on her eyelids. She runs on the empty street before dawn, runs right into her future. And when she does, she buys her coffee, talks so freely, hair becomes curtains, curtains curtailed by long fingers, and fingers heed the call to keep moving. The sun rises, the stage is the brightest it can be. When purity drifts in through show lights and such strong rays peek over earth, she pays the barista and says to herself, "This is so easy." This next poem has a long title. The title is, "The ancients sent their kids," he means sons, "on a year pilgrimage, my dad says, to soothe me. Knowing things could be better ate away at me, like my father ate his roast avocado BLT when he visited for the long holiday weekend. The claim that what makes a victorious leader is someone who does not want to lead in the first place does not sit well with me. It is some sort of distortion of demeanor, what we all know but won't face, can't say. Napoleon, Exhibit A. Knowing things could be better ate away at him, like escaping Russians wish they ate away at the mincemeat pelmenis they left in the fray. I think of Julius Caesar drinking away on wine that he took without asking from ancient Gaul because he kind of just felt like it. And back in time, Genghis Khan eating almost nothing throughout a childhood of drought and growing into some sort of hunter of every food-filled cornucopia in the world. All the greats, or at least some Romans, went off for a fat year to seed and land on backs that they owned, to wave off well-off prophecies, to learn of the next meal for themselves. So my dad tells me, as we talk about this upcoming trip of mine, we have a vision of a throne in a wood, if only I nail the last interview. At this moment, all of you know what I did not at the time. When Nemo boards the vessel for the great beyond starlit shores and gets through countless storms, he doesn't ride in gold-adorned chariots when he lands. And the meals are different, but I learned that much too late. All right. This next poem is Queso and Chocolate. "What did you just say to me?" he says to me. As I say, we are all 6 degrees separated from someone who doesn't have a pair of shoes, or even less if you count who you interact with online. This is in the local Mexican restaurant, the one with the best white queso. He keeps talking, kind of skips over the interruption, and what he says about his struggles is misaligned with his background and education. So I dip out into a memory of Christmas in China, alone, walking home with a box of chocolates given at school under my arm. In this mental space, I relive a boy rolling out from cardboard walls where his mother or some older woman stays hidden. My bathroom tiles are warmer than his bed, and I know he will never scrub off the dirt floors. They sink in, sprout defensively against hot water and paychecks. I want to place the candy near his opening, which is near my gate, which is near the elevator to a skyrise, top floor on the lake. I want to tell him caramel insides cure more than hunger. They enshrine individual accountability, grow inside like a child to burst forth, pushing him out of this event horizon. They at least stick, with or without braces. That is when someone orders more queso over thoughts of drawing short sticks. And while everyone nods, I nod, I choke, I stop him, almost, nearly correct his mistake, because the boy in my head is on the floor, watching, and girls who reject acceptance letters to help their families, and dads who work 7 days a week, and moms who live in shadows, the backbreakers, are sitting on the offensively bright booth across from us, their backs against the hardwood backing that shows a man farming corn in the sun. They are beside me, in disgust, cringe at us, horrified, chocolates more than we ever needed, pouring out of our pockets and falling on the floor. They might believe him, but I doubt it, and I feel sick to my stomach, and I can't stand to watch. This next poem is very long, so consider yourself warned. It is the longest one. I have 2 more poems left. So, yes. The next poem is called "You Are Renaming the Birds." You are renaming the birds. All those with English names, bye-bye bird, to avoid bias and subjectivity, an impossible feat, sort of like human flight, and to remove a feather of misogyny and racism from the wild. It may not surprise you, most birds deemed racist live in Florida. A dove that refers to an old civilization in South America, a curlew named after an ethnic group from Arctic places. All hummingbirds native to this continent have a fresh start. But most of the names are something like Anna or Wilson. So while you extrapolate intentions and define everyone by the worst thing they could have or might have done, I will remember the words you transplant. I ignore the recent John Oliver episode on a bird. And when someone uses bird song in a sentence, I do not provide examples of humans bursting into rhythm for territorial purposes. A friend gives me advice. The new phrase is to feed two birds with one scone. Pecking order implies some people have more power than others. I yearn to flap about how some do. Another way of saying 81% of people are excited about this change is to say, out of the readers who like surveys, about 17 of them thought this was the right kind of gesture. But it is important to say the truth out loud. The names do not change how I feel watching a new flight. Wing take air, air dip below, above, wing overhead. The wind, silence carries, the wing flies itself and takes the rest with it. I breathe a snapping breeze into my cage, and the bird rides. But the change does make the world more alien to those struggling with the coldness leaking in, who miss when they watched mallards with their dad before he was gone, they moved, or someone got sick, before there was a new right side of the river. I would say, do what you will, but you already have. When my son finds feathers on our window, he says, goodbye, black and brown bird. In a moment like one where the child cares that the bird was there, cares that some of it is still there, does not know its future, but does know that birds are beautiful, are nice things outdoors, knows that saying goodbye to a thing can make it better, knows that being good makes him feel warm. And who knows, maybe its feathers hear what the universe is putting out there about clean windows. Sometimes I hear it above the trees. You do not have to teach a person to like animals, or to run in a pile of leaves, or to swing higher. People, when given the chance, are kind. There are exceptions, but we live in the branches of the average, can be happy there, have been before. It's not just about happiness, though. I know. My husband tells me about death. The theories of the universe and his stress about the afterlife are placed together, not mingling, but caged with separate description plaques and diets in the same habitat of the brain. I decided then to be the messenger bird. The newest theory is this. Your conscious is not a breeding male Smith's longspur with a bush of golden feathers bursting from the chest, producing something unique from the space around it, with a head that works erect in black and white. Your conscious is unremarkable. That's what they're saying. Something to put on the hook in the garage. It reads the universe, deciphers what is already carried from a place over there to a place over here, and millions of years, and ozone, and minerals, and X's and Y's, etc., etc. It is just the thing that sees the Scots Oriole from Baja, California, a sleek body of the Ictrid family, sharp, yellow, black, bold, sparrow-like, lighting up desert to lit from yucca plants, to carry those waves through that tool in your head, so that you may feel it, the steam of the boiling river rising, upward, then falling, shot from the cloud, hit by the branch, tumult chaos carries, things reach overhead, and claws find feathers. The conscious is part of the earth tones. It takes air, dies in the accumulation of red, yellow, green, and white. It hums. To keep from all those names filling up the world with independent subjectivity, we must do the impossible, create a goodbye with a rhythm that soothes, lay in a permanent nest, and hope that when the tool is broken down, it is made into something considerate of its primitive past. And my last poem tonight is Flies of Society. You have to wonder if John Muir ever saw a housefly, a big chunky black bug touching his barbecue on 4th of July. Would he save his holiday bread or sigh, we all flow from one fountain soul? If flies had their 9 to 5 and career track and death was taken off the table, they would be of the slothful kind in my Southeast Missouri stable, a place where my own pack thinks that, since I love nature, I must be blind to its combat. The thing is, I love nature's teeth, the do or die, the late bird losing the worm in a downpour. I am holding a phone that tracks me in camouflage. I am hiding in clothes machine made. I am wearing a watch that touts the quality of my sleep without knowing my dreams. And so I think I understand the fly well enough. Raise the right swatter near the blind side, for if given the choice of one or the other, I would land on a hot dog, not a carcass. I would rub my hands together, sanctified, take my fill, and fly away with a swat satisfied. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kirby. The combination of irreverence and seriousness is really impressive. Thank you very much for reading with us. All right, I'm going to keep us moving. Our second reader for the evening is Kristin Emanuel, who holds an MFA in poetry from the University of Kansas, where she studied eco-fabulism. I forgot to ask you what that actually means. Very excited to hear. And the comics poetry movement. She is now a PhD student researching poetry and poetics at Washington University here in St. Louis. In 2022, it's Danica Kelly, right? Not Donica Kelly. Danica Kelly selected her as a finalist in Boston Review's annual poetry contest. No small feat. Her latest poems, comics, and reviews have appeared in journals such as Shenandoah, the Indianapolis Review, and Colorado Review, with new poetry forthcoming in I-70 Review, Ecotone, and Rhino 2024. Kristin, please.
Calculations into Is this good? Can you all hear me? All right, perfect. Well, I'm going to sound like a broken record coming second, but thank you so much, Aaron and Kenneth, for all of the work that you do behind the scenes at the St. Louis Poetry Center. Thank you to Kirby for reading with me tonight and sharing your beautiful poetry. And of course, thank you to all of you for being out here. So I have a bit of a double feature for you all today. Which is to say the first part of my reading draws primarily from a manuscript that I'm working on about extinction. And the second part of my reading is poems about the Loch Ness Monster. I am infatuated with Nessie, so that will also be exploring similar themes of extinction and ecological catastrophe. My first poem is Masterpiece of Ache. Sick again. Closest ken an ocean away. Geranium petals pigmenting the porch. Each day bees sleep in bursts totaling 8 hours. Sometimes huddled in flowers, gripping one another. Threat coupled with care. Smitten by this living for which I was so crudely prepared. Less than 1% of all species that ever evolved still exist. A big brittleness. At the Science Museum, an exhibit where I place my thumb inside the heel of a T-Rex footprint, feel that bodiless texture, almost inhabit it. Six maxims for the sixth mass extinction. 1. Be creaturely, mammal, mother or redolent other. 2. Remember your nakedness, nimble in skin, to be and be, hemmed within this body, its ooze, its fixity. 3. Rejoice. You are livable after all. Imagine your brain as you might imagine starlings in murmuration, a nucleus uplifting. 4. See bee colonies collapsing, calamities persist, kindly outlast the apocalypse without causing it, wield neither boot nor fume, cherish life ant by ant, swarm and herd the superflux, the flourishing. 5. Glut yourself on existence. Read about 2 ornithologists witnessing the black-naped pheasant pigeon after 140 years lost to science. Imagine them tracking it through Papua New Guinea amidst thickets of nippy insects, rivers whipping around ridges, all the way to an understory where the bird persists, more myth than living memory, flipping its tail, flaunting its poncho of rust gold feathers, every movement a dance, a defiance. 6. Say, good morning, to the man sweeping maple seeds from his driveway. It's all he can do to forestall a future without civilization. One so luscious, so eager to take hold, know that you too are searching for a balance between letting go and not being overtaken. So my next poem is an old one and a dear one. It's the titular poem for my work in progress collection. And I wrote it after learning that North American bird populations have plummeted by 3 billion individuals since their levels in 1970. The poem is entitled Bird Watching in the Fourth Dimension. The birds left last autumn. All of them. It was a departure so well orchestrated that you could have mistaken their wings for rustling leaves. Except, being birds, they lifted upwards instead of falling, many millions of them, robins and finches, crows and cranes, the waxwings and the warblers, the buzzards and the blue jays. My friend saw a sparrow suddenly blip out of existence, leaving a neon blue afterimage. A woman across the street watched her canaries phase through their cage like melted candle wax. The local magpies disappeared in synchrony. They resembled smudges or thumbprints, each a blot of India ink sinking tunefully into cloud. The silence that followed was loud, like the buzz after a rock concert. Our senses were aflutter. It was as if we had lived through something both vital and devastating. On that day, every avian shook loose its scientific name, leaving ornithologists baffled. The calls we had cataloged so painstakingly ceased to exist. No more caw-caw, hoo-hoo, or tweedledee. Perhaps only absence could convince us that it had been quenching enough just to see the birds, and in seeing, to share their company. So my next 2 poems, I consider them to be both odes and elegies simultaneously. So the animals featured in these poems are either critically endangered or already extinct. And through these, I hope to address the impulse to mourn while simultaneously making a space to celebrate these animals having ever lived at all, not to reduce them to mere tragedy, but to make a space on the page for their living. So this poem is for Najin and Fatu. In this poem, the last two living northern white rhinos, Najin and Fatu, are abducted by aliens. Their skin turns opalescent in the suctioning beam of a spaceship. Weightless, they flounce and twirl upwards, buoyant like the animals in Fantasia wearing tutus, bellies jiggling to music. Except it's silent. Nighttime. The guards who have protected them from poachers don't know what to do. As Najin and Fatu shrink into gleaming specks, it feels right for their life's mystery to be renewed. Until now, our plan was for them to savor each blissfully numbered afternoon, scratching their hides on fence posts, tails swatting flies. No one but the aliens imagined an ending where they didn't die. This next poem is for the last known Tasmanian tiger that died in captivity in the mid-1900s. So for those of you who don't know, the Tasmanian tiger, or thylacine, was a marsupial native to Australia. And through convergent evolution, it actually looks a lot like a canine, but with stripes adorning its lower back. So this is footage of Benjamin, the last living Tasmanian tiger, 1935, colorized. 1 year before dying of exposure, left outside, unprotected, you pace around your enclosure like a moving watercolor, heaving sheath of muscle, hips and hide lilting as if the world were made specifically for you to pass through. It's easy to forget. You were mothered into existence. Yes, even the long gone once knew tenderness. 2. There are still sightings many years after you were declared extinct. Telltale flash of your body slipping over a hillside, parting grass and air. Where is the pathway you frequent? The one where cryptids and myths meet in their eternal migration, perhaps stopping for a moment, swapping stories and sipping tea. Last of your family, genus, species. 3. We could reconfigure you through de-extinction. Forcibly extract your essence, twirl bone and tendon around your memory like cotton candy compacted into realness. Would this be the first time in history an animal was ever dragged from the billowy chapel of oblivion? All of us, moribund, hoping only to mother the dead. Dear Benjamin, don't you want to feel hunger again? All right, so we're moving into part 2. So part 2 is inspired by a moment years ago when I flipped on the TV and found myself watching an interview with a cryptozoologist who said that cryptids, and this includes Mothman, Sasquatch, Nessie, might just be animals displaced from time after falling through wormholes. Some people theorize that the Loch Ness Monster is actually just a dinosaur or an ancient marine reptile, essentially the last of her kind. So stick with me here. I think that this is possibly the saddest, most poignant, and beautiful way of thinking about extinction. So I'm going to read a series of poems that were inspired from a cryptozoologist from my project entitled "The Loch Ness Monster is a Widowed Time Traveler." FYI, Nessie. Scientists say they have dismantled your existence with a genealogical survey. Particles mapped into DNA, truth sequenced from slime and excrement. They have concluded that you are an eel, as muscular as a grown man's thigh. But we do not believe such lies. We know there are wormholes made of shocked quartz underwater where creatures enter our world from far off dimensions. When you first slipped through, you were smeared, your body continually ripped and reconfigured, twirling in arabesques, tail-paving contrails, spine splitting with diaphanous wings. Eons flickered by in an instant until, displaced but immaculately alive, you arrived. Now you perforate Loch Ness, materializing from droplets, your neck like the world scroll of a violin plesiosaur or alien. Too often, we are tricked by sticks, by blooming algae, but we know you are there, have prepared search parties. Some evenings, we wade along the shoreline while the shallows swallow our ankles, blur or flutter, barest skid of scale against toe tip, oh, gargantuan misfit. We are awed by your suggestion, so supple a lostness, a flux, mother to the lonesome monster, and all of us. Everywhere, there are orphaned and widowed cryptids caught between dimensions, blistering through a profoundly decadent universe. You have glimpsed other travelers in passing, animals unhitched from timelines, Sasquatch clomping barefoot through forests, bunyip, chupacabra, and kraken. As is the case with you, Nessie, these cryptids are functionally extinct, yet still lingering, their bodies like missing mittens, as if space somehow mislaid them in its immense and wondrous negligence. In the Cretaceous period, your lover once wooed you with fish. He would shear their scales using his teeth as instruments. You remember paddling to snatch each scale, rose-girdled azure, steel gray, all tremoring. Afterwards, he would gift you with a pillowy, pungent flesh underneath, and you would eat. You can recall your initial courtship dance, how he snorted little bubbles with his nose that tickled your chin and belly, how the two of you swirled upwards in ever-tightening spirals, paving silvery flipper trails until you were necking like swans and you felt the pulse in his throat. Heartening. You dream in geologic time. Glaciers aching, hairline fractures quaking into chasms, cities metastasize, meteors, legions of butterflies. One night you dream of your lover ossified, his skeleton, jawbone, cranium, the sculpt of his spine, bleached and desiccated. Displayed in a museum, what's left of his body twirls upwards towards the ceiling, spotlit, leering. Slow dancing, alone, dressed in kelp and silky slime, water and brine, the swoop of your back, an old-timey epoch waltzing in your eyes. We will meet you in the shallows, water gulping our calves, summer sweat beating our temples, swatting gnats, lips wetted. We will halloo for you, aching for your tremor. Oh, to see you peeking from the lock, chin drizzling to run a hand along your pebbled skin, to press an ear against your chest and listen. Just listen. Nessie, you're here to help us make sense of our doomed bodies. To find in them, if not serenity, a selfless relishing. To know we were always meant to be the last of our own kind, bona fide, so far beyond the point of endangerment that we can begin existing for the first time. Thank you.
All right, Kirby, I'm going to ask Kirby to come back up, and we're going to have a conversation with these two lovely folks. Surprise me. This is where you can tell a joke if you'd like while I'm dawdling.
That's a lot of pressure.
It's more pressure once I tell my Britney Spears joke again. I'm rarely in the middle. This is awkward. So let's start. We have a lot of questions we could get into, and I have them ready to go. But I wanted to start by asking if any of you all have anything that has popped to mind as you were watching these folks read, or any folks on the interwebs. Not yet. Okay. Yes, Mark, go for it.
Kristin, you make extinction sound beautiful.
Is that a question? Awesome. You do make extinction sound beautiful. It's true.
Oops.
I'm going to start by asking about humor. And I noticed it. I've read both of what you were going to read before tonight. But seeing it performed, it stuck out even more. So you both mentioned kind of wanting to find more ways to introduce humor in a way that makes sense, and that often we kind of write off humor in poetry as something that's not quite as serious. So I'm just curious how you think about humor in your work, how you think about introducing humor in a way that still integrates into the work and doesn't draw too much attention to itself, if that makes sense. So I'm going to pick on you first, just because you're to my left and I'm left-handed.
Oh, no. Okay. Yeah. Let's see if I can consolidate this, because I could probably rant about this for hours. So I have a thesis statement here. It's a work in progress. I think that tragedy turns us into passive observers, and I think that at its best, humor can turn us into hopeful actors. So I'm going to unpack that a little bit, and I hope you don't mind if I reverse engineer the definition of humor through an investigation of tragedy very quickly.
Do it.
Very quickly.
Come
You
on.
can tell I'm a PhD student. Okay, so first, I think that tragedy is often thought of as the absence of humor, which is why I think that we use laughter in order to cope with sadness as a way of trying to reclaim agency over loss or over a situation that seems outside of our agency. I think too that tragedy actually comes along with a set of risks that we should not ignore. The first of those risks is that tragedy risks turning loss into a spectacle. I think the second is that through tragedy, sometimes you reduce the range of emotions experienced by a subject, and you diminish it down to its saddest components rather than moments of happiness and bliss. And the third, which I think is most important to my own poetry, is that with ecological catastrophe, through framing it as tragic, you risk drawing a foregone conclusion. So for example, if you think of the last two living northern white rhinos as tragic, then you are projecting onto them a future and an ending that hasn't yet happened. And as a result, you're ignoring the beauty of their living present. And I think that's terrible. So at its best, I think humor is actually a celebration of life and a way of shocking us back into the present.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right. That was.
It was. It actually absolutely was. What do you think?
Yeah. I might not be as detailed as you. I think that I agree with everything you just said. I also feel like humor is right up there with love and tragedy in terms of just human experience. It's something that you have to have a human experience. And although like not all poetry has to be this way, I feel most poetry is supposed to take someone who has never met you and has nothing at all in common with you, and to show them that the thing that they're feeling, another person has felt that thing before, and to surprise them by that. And humor does that. It's like one of the best tools we have to show someone that we understand where they're coming from. It's also, like as a bonus, extremely healing. And so I think humor is just like one of those core tools. And if it starts like popping into a poem, I don't look at it like, oh, do you belong here? Like, do I need to weigh it? Similar, like if love or tragedy pops into my poem, it's there, and I need to know it's there and like make sure it works. But it belongs. It belongs in poetry for sure. So, yeah.
I love it. I will regale you at another time about the fact that because comedies end in marriage, that makes Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, a comedy. I'm going to skip to the idea of kind of writing in different forms, different genres. We talked about that a little bit before the reading, because both of you, in your own right, some of us professionally, some of us for school, write in very different ways than we do when we're writing creatively. So I'm kind of curious as to your process, not necessarily, and I want to draw a distinction here between process and craft. I'm not necessarily talking about kind of sitting down and thinking about the minutia of making it into a beautiful work. I'm literally kind of more talking about the logistics, thinking linearly of how something goes from an idea into a finished kind of thing, and how those might differ from genre to genre or form to form, if at all. So I'll pick on you first this time.
That's fair. Yeah, I actually like this question a lot because I come to poetry somewhat as a long form writer. So for most of my life, most of my writing has been thousands of words. And so I approached poetry when I first started really taking it more seriously, like I approach long form. And to make a long form piece for me, it has to do with kind of two pillars. One is you have that idea, like that interesting guy did that interesting thing, and that's a fun sentence. And you're like, if that was a story, that would be interesting. But there's another pillar you have to deal with when you're writing a long story, and that is what you feel like writing in that moment. And you can't ignore that. When you sit down and you have the pen and you're writing, and you, the thing in you that wants to write, does not care about that interesting idea at all. And you do kind of have to listen to like what you want to write in the moment. And I approached poetry kind of like that, and it did not work at all. Poetry, for me, it needs space. It doesn't need to be like, this is the idea, and what do I need to write? And it doesn't need so much thought. It almost needs your attention whenever it needs your attention. So I've learned that some of my best poems come from when I'm open to when, I don't want to say inspiration hits, because that's not what it is, but when there is a thought of a poem or a possibility of a poem, I have to act in the moment, and that is kind of what has helped my poetry grow. It's sitting down and doing whatever that interesting idea is right there. And it's different than long form, where it's more of planning and more mechanical. So yeah. So I do think it's actually really different. It's like almost a different part of the brain, a little bit.
Yeah, got it. So what about you, like someone who's working on sort of dissertation level work, which I would imagine is rather different than working on a poem?
Yeah, I think I've spoken with both of you about the fact that I discovered a couple years ago that you can start a text chain with yourself. And that has become a big part of my poetic process, is just sending disorganized texts to myself at 2 a.m. and then later stitching those into a poem. I do think that poetry is a lifestyle. I think it's a way of perceiving of the world and interacting with the world. but I do think that there are certain logistics behind that. So I actually was lucky enough to speak with Eduardo Corral in the fall, and he talked about notebook practice as a big part of his own creative praxis, which was just keeping a notebook and writing down whatever he thought or felt, and then several months later kind of pulling together those ideas and then synthesizing a poem out of it. To the extent that I have a notebook practice, it's like sticky notes and note cards and miscellaneous scribbles, so it's very sloppy. On a more abstract level, I do think there's this aspect of process that I've come to know more and more as the years have gone by, which is that I write poems and think about poems the best in moments of transit. And I think a lot of other poets have expressed a similar feeling, which is to say, if I'm going for a walk, then a poem will probably come to me. This is sort of the shower thought phenomenon, which is that if you're in like this transitory or liminal space in between tasks, that's when you finally allow yourself to think and you get in touch with some part of you that you have been stomping down and snuffing out every other moment in the day. It can be when you're in transit on a commute to work. It can be when you're in transit between the states of wakefulness and sleep. But identifying those moments in your life, I think, at least for me, are very central to my poetic process.
Yeah, that's real. I could show you, and I usually will just title them like new poem idea number whatever. It's the voice memo feature on my phone when I'm driving. And it's like 5 minutes of just babble that will congeal to like 20 seconds of beautiful whatever. Cool. So I want to respect our time this evening. I have one question, and then I'm going to get us to kind of wrap up by thinking about cool stuff together. And that is because you both resonated with this question right before the reading, which is, what aspect of your life that may or may not have anything at all on its face to do with poetry could you not possibly give up because it would completely throw your writing life on its head?
Awesome. Thank you for this. Resonating, meaning I didn't have a good answer. You know, I don't know. Part of me, I've moved a lot and everyone goes through changes, but writing has always kind of been there. So part of me feels like, except for some very extreme things, most things, even if they go away, I will still be writing poetry and I will still be writing. But beside that, I really am just a big believer of like getting out and doing things, and if you don't just go out and do things, that definitely affects my writing. I mean, if I'm just never experiencing anything new or at least appreciating what I'm doing. So just going, whether that's going to parks or museums, if I stopped doing that, that would probably kill me. So yeah, just getting out and like the actual act of showing up places and talking to people, if I stopped that. I know that's an easy answer though, because that probably would affect everyone in every way, but yeah, that's what I've got, so.
No, we forget to, I'll pick on Bill. How many poems about poetry does Billy Collins have at this point in his career? You know what I mean? Get out of the house, Billy Collins. What about you?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm a little bit more like Billy Collins. So poetry is my vocation. My entire adult life has been centered around poetry, so it might be a bit of a cop-out to say absolutely anything except for poetry has become the fuel for my poetry. I absolutely echo going out into museums and also just like sampling from other art forms and other types of media, whether that's an art museum or that's, at least for me, watching every single Godzilla movie. Or also something I've done is like volunteering for the local bird rescue and writing a bio for a 40-year-old cockatoo who mimics dial-up internet noises. That has become so much more powerful and potent a fuel for my poetry than actually consuming poetry at this point. So I think we each have to reckon with what's the stage that we're at in our writing, and are we at a point where we actually need to take a step away from poetry in order to rediscover our love for it? And everybody goes through those phases of like utter obsession with poetry and reading it, to needing to take a break from it.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Sorry, Billy Collins. I do love Billy Collins. Yes, please.
I have a question. Would you guys both share maybe the very first time you remember reading a poem, probably young, and you remember thinking, I like this form of writing. Or like maybe as a youngster, what poem, if you can remember, or where were you? Maybe you don't remember the poem. You probably do because you're poets, but do you understand what I'm asking?
Thanks, Mom. I got you. I don't remember a very young memory of poetry, but I do remember a poem I liked a lot. As a sophomore in high school, I wrote my now husband a poem for Christmas, and I wrote it at Panera while studying for a math test because I didn't feel like doing that, and that was fine. And I remember writing that poem and feeling like what I was actually thinking was heard, or like on paper, maybe for not the first time, but for like a rare moment. I felt like I was able to say what I actually wanted to say. And that is why I write. I think that I am not capable of expressing myself as well talking as I am writing. I'm not nearly as confident or clear. I don't get to the point. So writing is my ability of speaking. And writing that poem was definitely a moment for me where it kind of stuck in my head. It's like maybe something's there because I enjoyed it and I felt heard. So
I love it. It was a good one, by the way.
Can we hear the poem?
I got it right.
Look under your seats.
Yeah, I think the first encounter that I can remember with reading poetry was Shel Silverstein in elementary school. And I wonder now whether he planted the seeds for my own fascination with image text, because you had those little scribbly illustrations alongside his poems, and also this underlying sense of whimsy and happiness. And I feel like there's something there that still lingers in the fabric of my poems. So, I mean, I encountered that. I didn't read Shel Silverstein and say, I'm going to be a poet. But that was something that I encountered again later on in high school and then in college.
I know he's been canceled for a couple of reasons, but Dr. Seuss, I mean, Bartholomew and the Oobleck is a genius book if you've never read it. It's long and very bizarre. So I'm going to begin to close this by asking, and I didn't give you a heads up about this, so surprise. We're going to gather some paradise. I stole this practice from Al Filreis at the Writer's House. This is just me asking you what cool, interesting, new art, what preferably writing or poetry, doesn't have to be, is really getting you jazzed up these days. A new movie you've seen, a new TV show you've seen, a new art piece you checked out, a new podcast you're listening to. I'm going to plug, I am currently obsessed with perfect 2-minute pop songs. And that sounds so weird, but just as someone who is very interested now in my writing life of trimming every possible fat I can off of my poem, a really perfect 2-minute pop song is just a very special kind of perfection. 2 examples I'll give you is if you're familiar with Mitski, My Love, Mine All Mine is really beautiful. And today I've been listening to a hell of a lot of the Beatles, and You've Got to Hide Your Love Away. It's 2 minutes long, if you can believe it. So you can listen to that 4 times over and hear something different every time. So the 2-minute pop song is my suggestion. I'm going to pass it to you.
I'll buy you time, Kirby. So, let's see. A collection of comics poetry that I really love is called Big Gorgeous Jazz Machine by Nick Francis Potter. Amazing. It's all like traditional art illustrations that he scanned and then added his poetry to. Highly recommended. Outside of poetry, please see Godzilla -1. It's amazing. And then sort of adjacent to my poetic practice, The Evolution of Beauty by Richard O. Crum is an amazing book where he talks about aesthetic choice and sort of aesthetic practice among non-human animals. So a big portion of that book is devoted to descriptions about bird plumage, bird songs, dances, bowerbirds and the wild structures that they build. So they create these towers out of sticks and they ornament it with plucked butterfly wings and fruit pulp and lichen. And it's one of the greatest cases that I've seen for non-human artistry and the idea of animals as artists. So highly recommended.
Very cool.
Okay, I'm actually going to ask Kevin, can you hand me my phone real fast? Because I'm obsessed with this album, but I cannot remember the name of it. But it is beautiful and it is a piece of art, and I want to share that. But while I'm finding it, I just finished Shell by Craig Arnold, which I think both of you are familiar with. I loved it. Yes, it was really good. And I'm in the middle of Life After Rugby by Eileen Gassell. I don't know if that's familiar. Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm in the middle of that book right now, and it's very good. But in addition to that, another piece of art that it's called Multitudes. Multitudes by
Feist.
Yeah, Feist. Have you heard it? Oh man, I'm obsessed. Like, 3 times a day I listen to this album all the time. So I highly recommend that as a piece of art. And also, Shell is a beautiful book of poetry if you're looking for more poetry.
If you love Feist, not only check out that record, listen to her interview on the Broken Record podcast. She talks about her creative process, and she's in a songwriting group, much like the writing group y'all are in. So yeah, check it out. Okay, please help me begin to close our evening by appreciating these poets. Always a thrill to be with you all. I want to begin by letting you know that our next reading is going to be another fantastical one. It is on February 20th, if I'm not mistaken. And our readers will be Jason Vassar-Elong and Asha Larson Baldwin. Asha might be watching. Very excited for you to be on the stage. I don't have the blurb at my fingertips right now, but our working kind of theme is Black histories and Black futures. So I'm very, very excited for that discussion. So definitely check that out. Let's see. I think I gave you all the announcements at the beginning. Please come speak with Travis, with Aaron, with myself if you're interested in finding out more about becoming a member or checking out these events. And yeah, always big thank you to Aaron for pulling all of the Wizard of Oz strings behind the curtain to make this thing work very well. Thank you to you for, again, actually showing up in real human form at a live poetry reading. We do not take that for granted. Be safe, driving home, take care of each other. We'll see you next month.